The story begins following Jonathan Harker, a London lawyer traveling to the incredibly superstitious and not at all suspicious land of Transylvania to finish the selling of a house to Count Dracula. Upon getting to Dracula's castle, Jonathan quickly shows the readers he's better at ignoring red flags than I was in my last relationship. He sees Dracula crawl up the castle walls like Spider-Man, can't be seen in a mirror, and burnt his hand when he touched a crucifix. And all Jonathan thought after seeing that was, man, this guy's quirky. Eventually, he realizes Dracula is going to kill him, at which point he steals some of Drac's gold, hits him in the head with a shovel, and bolts into the woods. The perspective shifts from Johnny Boy to his fiancée Mina, who's sending letters to her bestie Lucy. Mina talks about how worried she is about not hearing back from her fiancé, to which Lucy responds, "Totally, that's like so uncool. Anyways, I had 3 dudes propose to me today." Lucy's simp squad consists of Dr. Seward, the director of the local mental asylum, Arthur, a trust fund kid, and Quincy Morris, also known as the human personification of Texas and the only American in the book. Lucy decides she's going to get engaged to Arthur, and Quincy Morris sends them a letter of congratulations like the class act he is. Meanwhile, Dr. Seward records a diary entry on his phonograph, saying he's sad but more interested in his patient, Renfield, who keeps eating bugs and birds to absorb their life force for reasons totally unrelated to vampires. A shipping vessel crashes into the harbor. The only crew members on it are the dead captain who tied his hands to the wheel, and a random dog that jumps off the boat as soon as it gets to shore. Do we need to worry about that dog over there running off screen? Nah, it's probably nothing. It's not like it's a shape-shifting monster that ate the crew and now it's going to take the form of a man and terrorize the people of England. You make me uncomfortable. On the captain's body, a journal entry is found that says, "Yeah, a monster's eating my crew, but I'm getting this boat to shore dead or probably dead." Mina continues to worry about Jonathan while Lucy starts sleepwalking into graveyards while being followed by a mysterious shadowy figure that makes some weird bite marks on her neck. Just your average Tuesday, nothing to worry about. Lucy becomes bedridden by mysteriously not having enough blood in her body. Mina gets a letter from a hospital in Budapest saying, "Hey, we found your man, but he's got the brain fever. Come get him." Mina immediately departs to get her man back. While back at the asylum, Dr. Seward finds Renfield has escaped and is trying to get into the recently purchased home of Dracula while shouting, "The master is coming," over and over. Dr. Seward brings his favorite mentally ill bug eater back to the hospital and brushes off what he said as a different brand of his usual crazy. Lucy keeps getting sicker, so Arthur sends a letter to Dr. Seward asking to help Lucy. Seward then sends a letter to his mentor asking to help Lucy, and who should arrive but none other than the man himself, Professor Abraham Van Helsing. Van Helsing is the most fascinating character in the book since he's a sexist feminist and a senile genius that's built like he'd be anyone's first pick in the NFL draft. Van Helsing arrives to examine Lucy and says the reason she has a weird blood disease is because her blood is weird, but needs to go back home to figure out the specifics. The day after he leaves, Dr. Seward immediately writes for Van Helsing's return after they found Lucy looking like an empty pouch of Capri Sun. Van Helsing transfuses some of Arthur's blood back into Lucy, and after a night of Seward keeping watch over her, Lucy seems to be recovering nicely. However, Seward falls asleep while watching her the next night and awakes to find her once again drained of blood with bite marks on her neck. Seward gives her a transfusion of his own blood, while Van Helsing orders a bunch of garlic and spreads it around the room to keep Lucy safe. Once the doctors leave, Lucy's mother collects the garlic and throws it out because it smells bad and leaves Lucy unattended for the night. Lucy is found with her bloodometer once again at 0, which Van Helsing fixes by giving her some of his blood and giving her mother an earful about not touching his smelly plants. All is good for Lucy for about 4 days, until in the middle of the night a wolf's head bursts through her window like the Kool-Aid Man. Lucy faints, and her mother tears the garlic necklace off Lucy's neck, and immediately dies of a fear-induced heart attack. The maids of the house all see this, and instead of helping their unconscious employer and the fresh corpse that used to be her mother, they instead decide to get drunk and fall unconscious from drinking drugged wine. The 2 doctors show up in the morning to find the wreckage and it again deflated Lucy in need of a blood transfusion. Since neither of them can do it twice, Lucy's situation appears grim until Quincy Morris randomly shows up to give her his life juices. Arthur also shows back up at this point and is understandably distressed due to his future wife being sick and his dad dying. Oh yeah, that happened a few chapters back. The perspective shifts to the happy people subplot in Budapest to see that Mina and Jonathan are reunited, married, and returning to England. Isn't love beautiful when vampires aren't making constant withdrawals from your personal blood bank? Anyways, Lucy gets rid of some more garlic in her sleep and Dracula shows up to finish the job. As Lucy lays there dying, surrounded by Van Helsing and her simp squad, she asks Arthur for one final kiss. Arthur almost obliges her until Van Helsing stops him and reminds everyone it's no simp September, and Arthur restrains himself. Lucy dies, and the book goes into vivid detail about how sexy she is in death, which kind of weirds me out. The funeral happens, and afterwards Van Helsing tells Seward they have to cut off Lucy's head, which understandably confuses Seward. Mina and Jonathan return to London, and Jonathan immediately has a panic attack when he sees a man that looks suspiciously like Dracula. Mina hears about her friend's death. At the same time, the local newspaper writes about the mysterious bloofer lady who has been abducting children and leaving them with strange wounds on their neck. After reading his diary, Mina realizes Jonathan probably has PTSD from his time with Dracula. Van Helsing tells Seward the bloofer lady has to be Lucy because of reasons. Seward thinks Van Helsing is batty, get it, but agrees to at least check out Lucy's grave with him. During the night, they find her grave empty and see something white moving between the nearby trees. The two leave to investigate, and when they return to the grave, Lucy's weirdly sexy corpse has returned to her coffin. The doctors leave to tell Arthur they're going to mutilate his fiance's corpse because she's probably a monster, to which he says, "No, absolutely not," before joining them to mutilate his fiance's corpse because she's probably a monster. The trio waits by the once again empty grave and seal it off with Holy Communion wafers. In the nearby woods, they see Lucy appear with a 10-year-old in hand that she's treating like a chew toy. Upon seeing this, the three remove the wafers so she can sneak into the grave again. Arthur agrees that she's a monster and drives a stake through her heart the next evening. Mina and Jonathan visit Seward at the asylum, where Mina shares her husband's diary with Seward, then transcribes Seward's audio diary like a person who doesn't understand boundaries does. Jonathan discovers that 50 coffins of dirt have been shipped from Transylvania to England to be respawn points for Dracula. The rest of the main characters eventually come to the asylum after Van Helsing has time to read everyone's diaries before giving his final diagnosis of, "Yep, it's vampires." Van Helsing tells them all the rules about vampires, like how they're allergic to garlic, Christianity causes them pain, and how sunlight makes them sparkle. "And they're impervious to all weapons. But a bullet will work, right?" "What did I just say?" "Got it. I'll use 2 bullets then." Van Helsing gives the game plan to the rest of the characters. The men go search the town to find and destroy coffins, while Mina is supposed to stay on the sidelines as emotional support. This is a reminder that this book was written in 1897 and male authors don't know how to give female characters agency yet. The whole squad then goes to talk to Renfield to see what he knows about all the Dracula stuff, but find him acting completely normal, which is honestly the weirdest thing he's done so far. Renfield asks to be let out because he's not weird anymore, but Seward doesn't believe him, so he keeps him locked up in his room. The men go to town, destroy some dirt boxes, fight some rats, and return to interrogate Renfield for more information about Dracula, but don't get anything. Mina, meanwhile, is having trouble sleeping. She wakes up to see a pillar of smoke with a face leaning over her, and thinks, "That was a weird dream. Well, this isn't anything I should share or worry about." Jonathan looks for more dirt boxes while Seward probes Renfield to find out more about his sudden change of heart. The next night, the squad minus Jonathan and Mina hear screaming and find Renfield bloodied and nearly dead in his room. Renfield admits what we all already guessed. He was Dracula's #1 fan and ate birds and bugs to grow up big and strong like him. He also says Dracula has been visiting Mina's room and is there right now feeding on her before succumbing to his wounds. The 4 of them break through the door to Mina's room to see Dracula, one hand wrapped around the throat of an unconscious Jonathan, and the other being used to force-feed Mina his own blood. Van Helsing scares off Dracula with some holy wafers. The Count escapes by turning into fog and is chased away from the asylum by Quincy Morris. Darn. Guess I need to use 3 bullets. Jonathan, now conscious, and most of the squad head out to destroy the remaining dirt boxes. Mina, also conscious and now forever mentally scarred, is sealed in her room with holy wafers by Van Helsing, who after seeing Mina burn her skin after touching a wafer, diagnoses her with almost a vampire disease. In the morning, the boys are on their way to destroy the final dirt box when they encounter the big bad bat himself guarding the last coffin. The sun, however, has left the Count mostly powerless, and the power of Christ compels him to run like a bat out of hell. Van Helsing hypnotizes Mina to use her vampiric connection to Dracula to find his location. In her trance, she senses Dracula's boarded a ship back to Transylvania now that all his coffins are destroyed, and he's realized the universal truth that England is overrated. Van Helsing makes an inspiring speech to everyone, and plans for all 6 of them to catch Dracula together before he gets back to his castle. While the group is traveling, Van Helsing and Mina keep trying to track Dracula with her vampire mind meld. They realize Dracula's coffin has left the boat at port and is now traveling via horse-drawn carriage. The squad splits up to cover more ground on the way to Dracula's castle, with Van Helsing and Mina traveling via train, Arthur and Jonathan sailing via steamboat, and Seward traveling via horseback alongside Quincy. Van Helsing and Mina are the first to get to the castle. Overnight, as Van Helsing makes a circle of holy wafers for protection, he and Mina are nearly attacked by Dracula's wives, who are so attractive yet terrifying they scare their horses to death. Van Helsing sneaks into the castle after they leave and is nearly unable to holy wafer them to death due to how hot he thinks they are, but manages it anyway. The two travel back into the woods in hopes of reconnecting with the rest of the group, and spot a carriage of gypsies transporting an oddly plot-relevant looking coffin. At that moment, the rest of the characters rush the carriage on horseback. Seward and Arthur aim their rifles at the drivers, while Jonathan muscles his way onto the carriage with the help of Quincy Morris, who gets stabbed by a gypsy. The two of them manage to open the coffin when Dracula bursts out, ready to attack, but is immediately stabbed to death and turns into dust in the fleeting sunlight. The characters reunite as their friend succumbs to his wounds and dies happy knowing he made the world a better place through undead manslaughter. In the epilogue, Van Helsing returns home to Amsterdam. Seward and Arthur get married, possibly to each other the book doesn't specify, and Mina and Jonathan eventually have a son, who they name in honor of their dear friend, Quincy Morris. The end. This isn't a Marvel movie. There's no post-credits. Just leave.